There is a particular kind of love that does not announce itself. It does not rush forward with declarations or certainty. Instead, it hides behind hesitation, restraint, and contradiction. He may believe he is in control. He may tell himself this connection is casual, temporary, or undefined. Yet his inner world tells a different story. The sign is not found in what he says. It is revealed in what unsettles him. When a person is more in love than they consciously know, their psyche begins to reorganize around the presence of another. His thoughts return to you uninvited. His emotions react more strongly than logic would justify. He becomes alert, guarded, and strangely vulnerable all at once. You will notice it in his resistance. He may pull back precisely when the bond deepens. He may intellectualize the connection, rename it, or attempt to keep it safely categorized. This is not indifference, it is containment. Love threatens the identity he has constructed to remain stable, and so his mind attempts to defend itself. Watch for the moment when he becomes more himself around you, and then retreats. That oscillation is the signal. Love that has not yet been acknowledged behaves like a force beneath the surface, creating tension before it finds form. He listens to you differently, not to respond, but to orient himself. Yours begins shaping his inner compass. You may sense that he mirrors your moods, your rhythms, your silences. This is unconscious attunement. The psyche recognizes familiarity before the ego accepts it. The most revealing sign is this. Your presence disrupts his patterns. He becomes more reflective, more cautious with his choices, more aware of what he feels and what he avoids. Love, when unrecognized, does not soften, it destabilizes. It asks him to confront parts of himself he has long ignored. If he were less affected, he would be simpler. If he were indifferent, he would be consistent, but instead he is conflicted, and conflict is the birthplace of realization. Love begins long before someone admits it. It begins when the soul responds faster than the mind can follow. Unconscious love does not arrive with clarity or language. It enters as disturbance. The mind remains convinced that nothing significant is happening, yet the inner world begins to shift in subtle but unmistakable ways. Thoughts become less obedient. Emotions rise without permission. A person may insist they are unaffected, but their inner state betrays them. Love, when it has not yet reached awareness, expresses itself not as certainty but as tension. This disturbance often appears as restlessness. The individual finds their attention repeatedly drawn toward one person without intention. Memories surface unexpectedly. Ordinary moments feel charged, as if something unfinished is hovering beneath them. The mind searches for rational explanations, yet none fully account for the intensity. What is being felt has no agreed-upon name yet, so it manifests as unease rather than affection. There is also contradiction. A person may feel both pulled toward and threatened by the connection. They want closeness, then suddenly distance. They desire contact, then justify silence. This inner conflict is not confusion about the other person. It is conflict within the self. Love challenges the structures that keep identity stable. It exposes vulnerabilities that have been carefully managed or ignored. Until those parts are acknowledged, the psyche resists by creating disturbance. Emotional reactions become disproportionate. Small interactions carry unexpected weight. A glance lingers longer than intended. Absence feels heavier than it should. Words spoken by the other echo internally, replayed and reinterpreted. None of this is consciously chosen. The individual may even criticize themselves for being affected, yet the reactions persist. Unconscious love is revealed precisely in this lack of control. Defensiveness is another signal. When feelings remain unnamed, the mind attempts to protect itself by rationalizing, minimizing, or intellectualizing the bond. The person may reduce the connection to circumstance or coincidence, trying to strip it of emotional significance. But the more the mind argues, the more the body reacts. Tightness in the chest, a sudden alertness, a heightened sensitivity, these are not logical responses. They are somatic evidence of attachment forming beneath awareness. The disturbance often intensifies around moments of intimacy or emotional truth. When the connection deepens, anxiety may appear. When separation occurs, the disturbance grows louder. This pattern reveals that something meaningful is taking root, even if the conscious mind refuses to name it. Love that has not yet been admitted behaves like pressure building beneath the surface, seeking expression. Unconscious love also alters perception. The world subtly reorganizes around the person who has triggered it. Their presence brings clarity and disorientation at the same time. They feel familiar without explanation. Their absence feels disruptive rather than neutral. The individual may not think of this as love, but the psyche has already recognized significance. Words come later. Declarations require integration. Before love can be spoken, it must first be felt as disruption. Inner disturbance is the psyche's way of signaling that something essential has been touched, something that cannot remain ignored. Resistance is often misunderstood as lack of feeling, when in truth it frequently signals the presence of something far more powerful than indifference. When emotions run shallow, there is ease. When attachment is minimal, behavior remains consistent and uncomplicated. But when a connection reaches into deeper psychological territory, resistance emerges as a form of self-protection. It is not the absence of feeling that creates resistance, but the intensity of it. At a deeper level, resistance appears when an experience threatens the stability of one's inner structure. Love has this capacity. It does not merely add to life, it rearranges it. It challenges existing identities, long-held beliefs, and emotional defenses that were constructed to ensure survival. When such defenses are activated, the psyche does not move toward the source of disruption, it pulls away. This withdrawal is not rejection of the other person, but an attempt to preserve internal equilibrium. A person may resist by minimizing the connection, labeling it as insignificant or temporary. They may delay communication, avoid emotional vulnerability, or adopt a detached tone that contradicts their underlying reactions. These behaviors are often mistaken for disinterest, yet they require energy, awareness, and emotional engagement to sustain. Indifference does not need explanation. Resistance does. The intensity of resistance is proportional to the depth of what is being felt. The more meaningful the bond, the greater the threat it poses to established patterns. Love exposes unresolved wounds, unmet needs, and buried desires. It brings into consciousness aspects of the self that were long avoided. Resistance arises not because the connection lacks value, but because it holds too much of it. This internal struggle often produces contradictory behavior. A person may seek closeness and then abruptly retreat. They may reveal something personal, then close themselves off. They may appear conflicted, inconsistent, or guarded. These fluctuations are not signs of emotional emptiness. They are signs of internal negotiation. The psyche is attempting to manage an experience that exceeds its current capacity for integration. Resistance also manifests as control. The individual may try to define the relationship narrowly, impose rules, or keep emotional boundaries rigid. This need for control is a response to vulnerability. When feelings deepen beyond conscious intention, the ego attempts to contain them. Control becomes a substitute for surrender, not because surrender is undesired, but because it feels unsafe. What makes resistance particularly revealing is its selectivity. People do not resist what does not matter. They resist what has the potential to change them. If a connection were trivial, it would pass through without friction. Resistance indicates that something significant is pressing against the inner defenses, asking for recognition. Over time, resistance either hardens into avoidance or softens into awareness. But in its early stages, it serves as a signal that depth exists beneath the surface. What appears as distance is often closeness not yet understood. What looks like absence is frequently presence that has not found its voice. Emotional oscillation is one of the clearest signs that something meaningful is unfolding beneath the surface. When feelings are shallow or casual, emotions remain steady and predictable. There is little internal movement, little need for adjustment. But when a connection reaches into deeper psychological layers, emotions begin to fluctuate. This back and forth is not instability in the bond itself, it is instability within the person experiencing it. Oscillation occurs when desire and fear are activated at the same time. One moment, the pull toward closeness feels undeniable. The next, distance seems necessary for self-preservation. These opposing impulses do not cancel each other out, they coexist. The psyche moves between them, testing limits, searching for balance. This movement is not accidental. It reflects an internal struggle to integrate feelings that exceed conscious readiness. A person experiencing emotional oscillation may appear inconsistent. They open up emotionally, then become guarded. They seek connection, then withdraw without clear explanation. This pattern is often misread as indecision or lack of seriousness. In reality, it signals that the emotional experience is intense enough to provoke self-questioning. Indifference does not create oscillation. Only depth does. The oscillation intensifies around moments of intimacy. When emotional closeness increases, vulnerability rises with it. The individual may feel exposed, seen, or emotionally unprotected. In response, they retreat, yet the retreat does not bring relief. Distance creates its own discomfort, pulling them back toward connection. The cycle repeats because neither extreme fully resolves the inner tension. This pattern also reveals itself through heightened sensitivity. Small interactions take on disproportionate significance. A warm exchange produces hope and openness. A perceived shift or silence triggers doubt or withdrawal. These reactions are not calculated. They arise from an unconscious attachment that has not yet been consciously acknowledged or integrated. Emotional oscillation is the psyche's way of processing unfamiliar depth. The mind has not yet decided what to do with the feelings, so it moves between opposing strategies. Approach and avoidance become alternating responses to the same internal stimulus. Each swing reflects a momentary attempt to regain equilibrium. Importantly, oscillation is not manipulation. It is not a deliberate push-pull designed to control the other. It is an internal phenomenon expressed outwardly. The person may not understand their own behavior, only sensing that closeness feels both necessary and threatening. This confusion often produces guilt, self-criticism, or attempts to rationalize the inconsistency. Over time, emotional oscillation demands resolution. The psyche cannot remain indefinitely divided. Either the feelings are integrated and expressed with greater consistency, or they are suppressed, leading to emotional distancing. But before clarity emerges, oscillation serves as evidence that something significant is forming. Where emotions swing, something is at stake. Where there is fluctuation, there is investment. Emotional oscillation reveals a bond that is alive, unresolved, and powerful enough to disrupt inner stability before it finds conscious form. Unconscious attunement reveals itself quietly, without intention or effort. It occurs when two inner worlds begin to align beneath conscious awareness, long before either person decides that a connection exists. This alignment is not created through agreement or deliberate attention. It emerges naturally, as if the psyche recognizes something familiar and responds on its own. Genuine connection often begins here in subtle synchronization rather than overt expression. When unconscious attunement is present, a person finds themselves responding emotionally before they understand why. Moods shift in response to the other, as presence or absence. Energy rises or settles without explanation. There is an intuitive sensitivity to changes in tone, silence, or emotional undercurrents. This sensitivity is not learned, it is felt. The nervous system reacts faster than the mind can interpret. Listening changes under attunement. The person does not merely hear words. They absorb meaning beneath them. They notice pauses, hesitations, emotional weight. The other's voice carries significance beyond content. This kind of listening is not strategic or performative. It reflects an inner orientation toward the other person, as though attention has been recalibrated around them. Behavior also shifts subtly. A person may mirror gestures, speech rhythms, or emotional expressions without awareness. Their timing adjusts. Their responses become more finely tuned. These shifts are not conscious attempts to bond. They arise from an unconscious desire to align, to move in harmony with someone who has become psychologically relevant. Unconscious attunement often includes emotional resonance. One person as joy lifts the other without direct involvement. One person as distress creates unease, even when unspoken. This resonance can feel intrusive or confusing because it lacks clear boundaries. The emotions do not feel fully one's own, yet they are experienced deeply. This blurring is not the loss of self. It is a sign of relational depth forming beneath awareness. There is also a sense of familiarity that defies logic. The person may feel known without having revealed much. Time spent together feels different, either compressed or expansive. Silence does not demand filling. Presence itself becomes meaningful. These experiences are not the result of shared history, but of inner alignment occurring in real time. Unconscious attunement can be unsettling. It bypasses control. A person may resist it because it creates vulnerability without consent. Feeling attuned means being affected, and being affected threatens autonomy. Yet resistance does not dissolve attunement. It often intensifies awareness of it. The more one tries to disengage, the more noticeable the connection becomes. Genuine connection does not require constant interaction or affirmation. It reveals itself in how deeply one is impacted without effort. Unconscious attunement is evidence that the bond exists at a level deeper than choice. It shows that the psyche has already recognized significance, even if the conscious mind has not yet caught up. When your presence disrupts his established patterns, it signals that something meaningful has entered his psychological landscape. Patterns exist to preserve stability. They are habits of thought, emotion, and behavior that keep life predictable and manageable. When a person encounters someone who fits neatly into these patterns, there is little internal response. But when someone challenges them, the disturbance is immediate and unmistakable. Disruption often appears as heightened self-awareness. He may begin questioning routines he once followed without thought. Decisions that felt automatic now require reflection. This shift is not coincidence. Your presence introduces a new internal reference point, forcing him to evaluate himself in relation to something outside his established structure. What once felt sufficient now feels incomplete or uncertain. His emotional rhythms may change. He might become more introspective, more cautious, or more reactive than usual. You may notice moments where he seems unusually thoughtful, distracted, or emotionally alert. These changes indicate that his inner world is reorganizing. The psyche does not alter its patterns unless something significant demands attention. Disruption also reveals itself through inconsistency. He may act in ways that surprise even himself. Boundaries he once maintained rigidly may soften, while others become more pronounced. He may oscillate between openness and restraint, not because he lacks direction, but because his existing patterns no longer fully apply. Your presence introduces variables his inner system was not designed to manage. Time perception can shift as well. Moments with you may feel unusually intense or fleeting, while time apart feels heavier or more pronounced. This altered experience of time reflects emotional investment. His attention is no longer evenly distributed. It is being drawn toward you, often against his intention. You may notice changes in his priorities. He becomes more attentive to choices, consequences, and emotional nuance. Conversations with you linger internally, influencing his thoughts long after they end. This lingering effect is evidence of internal disruption. What does not matter does not echo. Disruption does not always appear as closeness. Sometimes it shows up as distance. When established patterns are challenged, the psyche may attempt to restore balance by pulling away. This withdrawal is not rejection of you, but an effort to regain internal order. Yet even in distance, the disruption remains. Avoidance requires energy. Indifference does not. Your presence may also awaken parts of him that were dormant. Curiosity, vulnerability, creativity, or longing may surface unexpectedly. These aspects disrupt the identity he has maintained. When someone evokes qualities we have not fully integrated, the resulting tension forces reevaluation. Disruption is the psyche's signal that growth is being demanded. Your presence is not simply added to his life, it reshapes it. Patterns break only when something meaningful arrives, something that cannot be ignored or easily absorbed. Inner conflict arises when the psyche encounters something it cannot immediately integrate into existing understanding. Before awareness forms, before words are found, the experience registers as tension. Conscious realization is rarely the first step. It is the final one. What comes before it is a period of contradiction, confusion, and psychological unrest that signals something important is unfolding beneath the surface. When feelings begin to deepen beyond what the conscious mind expects or permits, the inner world divides. One part of the self moves toward the experience, sensing meaning, connection, or possibility. Another part resists, guarding identity, habits, and emotional safety. This division creates conflict. The person may feel pulled in opposing directions without understanding why. The struggle is not about choice yet, it is about recognition. This conflict often manifests as overthinking. The mind circles the same questions repeatedly, searching for clarity that remains just out of reach. Rational explanations are constructed and dismantled in quick succession. The individual may attempt to downplay emotions one moment, only to feel overwhelmed by them the next. These mental loops are not indecision, they are signs that awareness is trying to emerge. Emotionally, the conflict creates volatility. Calm is interrupted by sudden intensity. Confidence gives way to doubt. Desire is followed by restraint. These shifts are unsettling because they disrupt the illusion of internal coherence. The person may feel as though they are no longer fully in control of their emotional responses. This loss of control is often the first indication that something has reached beyond conscious boundaries. Behavior begins to reflect the internal struggle. Actions become inconsistent, intentions unclear. The person may act in ways that contradict their stated beliefs or self-image. They may approach and withdraw, reveal and conceal. These contradictions are not signs of dishonesty. They are expressions of an unresolved inner dialogue that has not yet reached conscious conclusion. Inner conflict also brings heightened self-awareness. The person becomes more reflective, more attentive to emotional reactions they once ignored. Old assumptions are questioned. Emotional defenses that once functioned quietly begin to feel strained. This discomfort is not accidental. It is the psyche signaling that an update is required. Resistance often intensifies during this stage. The mind attempts to maintain equilibrium by suppressing or redirecting the emerging awareness. Yet suppression increases tension rather than resolving it. The more the realization is delayed, the stronger the conflict becomes. Eventually, the psyche demands resolution. Conscious realization arrives when the inner conflict can no longer be sustained. When opposing forces are acknowledged rather than denied, clarity emerges. The feeling is not sudden. It is inevitable. What was once experienced as confusion is understood as meaning. Inner conflict is not a flaw in the process. It is the process. And when that realization finally surfaces, it does not arrive as surprise, but as recognition. What once felt like confusion settles into clarity. The tension that moved beneath the surface reveals its purpose. Inner conflict was never a sign of chaos. It was evidence that something real was forming, pressing to be acknowledged. Understanding comes when resistance gives way to honesty. When the mind stops defending old patterns and allows truth to emerge. Love, awareness and transformation are not born in certainty, but in the willingness to face what has been stirring within all along. What begins as disturbance becomes direction. What feels like struggle becomes meaning. And in that moment, the soul understands what the mind needed time to accept.